Another awful outing by Sean Manaea yesterday directly leads to a blowout Giants loss and a series loss against an inferior team at home. And so with the Giants overall not performing great at 16-20, and with guys like Manaea and Stripling not performing out of the starting rotation or in the bullpen, it's time to make some changes.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And coming up on today's show, we're going to just discuss the dreadful starts to the season for pretty much every single offseason signing that the Giants have made. I just want to, before you just go into a fit of rage about this, the players who have performed best for the Giants, think just even in the starting rotation, are also signings, but just weren't this offseason, like Alex Cobb and Tony DeSclafani, right? And then, you know, on the hitting side, they've had plenty of successes, and then, of course, Gausman and Rodon and those types of guys. And so it's kind of, you know, it's just like, it just happens to be that this offseason's signings through 5 weeks have really, really struggled pretty much across the board, including on the offensive side, looking at someone like Michael Conforto, who finally hit a home run after snapping an 0 for 20 yesterday. So hopefully he can get it going, and I do believe he can. But where I'm less optimistic, and frankly, I wasn't particularly thrilled with the signing at the time. You can go back and check the receipts. I was like, I don't love this Sean Manaea signing, just because when you look at how he performed last year with the Padres, there wasn't a lot that I was seeing that stood out to me. Like when they signed Alex Cobb to like a similar contract, essentially, I could see like underlying numbers that suggested that there was something there that they could get out of him. And same with like Kevin Gausman. When they first signed him, remember, it was a 1-year, $9 million deal. And so he wasn't $100 million pitcher when they signed him. He was a guy available for 1 year, less than $10 million. And yet you could see some of the underlying metrics suggesting that there was perhaps another gear and perhaps a lot of other gears in the tank there. But with Sean Manaea, personally, I didn't see it when I looked through the numbers. However, I must point out this front office, frankly, is definitely smarter than me, and they have way more inside information, proprietary information. The way they evaluate players is so much more advanced than anything that I'm doing on this show, and that's true of pretty much every team in the league, just to be clear about that. And so they clearly, the thing too, I mean, Manaea had a bad 2022 with the Padres, but was generally a good pitcher for the A's for a number of years, and in his career, kind of at worst overall, just like an average pitcher. And so what we've gotten so far is not even close to average. Like they would take average out of Sean Manaea and Ross Stripling, but instead they've had well below average performance. So what does it look like, and what do they do? What does it look like? Well, Sean Manaea has a 7.96 ERA. He's made 6 starts, 8 appearances, so 2 out of the bullpen. The expected ERA is 8.00, and so he has earned every bit of that 7.96 ERA according to expected ERA, which is kind of a StatCast metric that's evaluating like the balls that are hit against you, regardless of whether they're like caught or not. It's kind of based, like when we say, oh, that had an expected average of whatever, it's kind of using that and taking out whether or not a great play was made of the equation. But the fielding independent pitching is, I guess, a little bit better, but still just ridiculously high at 6.62. And even the expected fielding independent pitching at 5.02. There's just nothing here that looks positive. I guess you could say his strikeout rate is fine at 24.8%. It's a little bit above average. The walk rate, though, that's the thing, is he has had so much trouble with command. And he's not a guy historically. I mean, right now, his walk rate, he's walking about 13% of the batters he faces. Whereas in his career, that rate is 6.4%. And so literally, he's walking more. Actually, his current walk rate is 12.8%, and the career walk rate is 6.4. So it's exactly double the career walk rate. And so he just doesn't have the command that he normally has. I'm looking through every season of his career. He's pitched starting in 2016, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. He's never not pitched in a season. And his highest career walk rate was his highest single season walk rate was 7.9%. And again, right now it's 12.8%. And so it's uncharacteristic of him to be this wild. And, the barrel rate against him, and barrels meaning not just hitting it on the sweet spot, but like hitting a barrel is like an official term. It's a StatCast term, and it's like you hit the ball hard and you hit it in an ideal range of launch angles, which are essentially like off the ground in the air, but not too high, like pop-ups. So you hit it hard at a good angle. That's called a barrel. And his barrel rate against him is very high at 17.3%. I would imagine if I look up the leaders in terms of the worst barrel rate allowed, that would probably be up there towards the top. And again, in his career, the barrel rate is 7.4%. So we're talking way more than double his career average here. And also, he's only stranding 51% of his base runners, which is just a ridiculously poor number. Whereas in his career, all pitchers actually who are not like, I couldn't go out there and strand 72% of my base runners because I'm not a major league player. But pretty much all major leaguers, generally speaking, are going to end up around this magic number of stranding about 72% of the base runners they allow. And indeed, in Stripling, in Manaea's, I may have said Stripling instead of Manaea sometimes here, but in Manaea's career, that number is 72%. But this year it's 51% right now. And then lastly, the batting average on balls in play against him this year is 338, whereas in his career it's just 291. And so this is not the Sean Manaea of even his career. And I think when they signed him, the hope was that they could make him even better than he was in his career. Like that's what they've done with other pitchers. You look at DeSclafani, you look at Cobb, you look at Gausman, Rodon, like just getting the most out of them and taking them to another level. But with Stripling and Manaea, it's been the opposite, where they've been worse than, like much worse than their career averages. And so at this point, given that the Giants are 16-20, there's a lot of pressure on them to perform well this year. If they have another disappointing year, if they miss the playoffs, if they finish below 500, like the front office has to be feeling the heat about a slow start. And I think the Casey Schmidt move kind of shows that someone asked me in a mailbag episode, like, how aggressive are they going to be promoting young talent? And I said, not necessarily that aggressive. And it depends on it, like based on need. And right now there's a need. And so I think that it is time to start thinking about replacements for some of these guys and at least just moving them to the bullpen. So what do you do? Do you DFA them? Do you move them to the pen? Do you use the injured list? We'll get into all of that in just a minute. But before we do, I want you to know that this episode is brought to you by Game Time. buying tickets to your favorite event, whether it's the Giants or a concert or theater or whatever, shouldn't have to be so stressful. And I know for me, I have had countless times when I'm mostly afraid that I'm not getting the best price, and also not to mention being hit by hidden fees. Also, if I'm going to a new venue, not being able to know what the view from the seat really looks like. And all of that is solved with Game Time. They've got images of seat views, the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, etc. And with the Game Time guarantee, it means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, here we go. More to get into. What do you do with the struggling Sean Manaea and Ross Stripling? I didn't really get into the numbers for Stripling, but they're not much better. I'll just briefly mention 6.66 ERA, 7.24 expected ERA, 6.58 fielding independent pitching. At least for him, the expected fielding independent pitching, which is just simply saying, like, if he wasn't allowing so many home runs, what would we expect his ERA to be? And at least for him, that number is 3.90. Whereas with Manaea, it doesn't even save him. If he were allowing a normal rate of home runs, it still wouldn't save him. The ERA, the expected ERA would be 5.02 with a normal home run to fly ball ratio and a normal batting average on balls in play. So just ugliness across the board for Sean Manaea, and I think unplayable at this point, especially in high leverage situations. And I consider the start of the game, every game is a high leverage situation. It is a tie game, and it is the leadoff hitters, the best hitters in a lineup coming up every game. That's why the most runs scored in an inning is the first inning on average, like in baseball, because again, it's the top of the lineup, and also probably has to do somewhat with the pitcher kind of settling in, but also it's always the top of the lineup. And so anyway, when I say I wouldn't put him in high leverage situations, I mean I wouldn't have him start another game until he figures some things out. Some people, on Twitter are suggesting DFAing Sean Manaea or Ross Stripling, and I just don't think that's in the cards 5 weeks into a 2-year deal. These are 1-year deals with opt-outs, but based on the performance, they're obviously trending towards not opting out. There's a lot of season left, and so I don't think we can make that determination yet. But they're not just going to DFA these guys. I think at the most extreme thing you would see is like an injured list thing with like a calf tightness, just something minor. Everybody's got something minor going on. Anyway, the Giants play the D-backs tonight at 6:40 Pacific, and it's a big 4-game series against a team in the division that has been playing better than the Giants. They have a better record than the Giants, and it is a 4-game series, and the Giants have Alex Cobb on the mound. They'll be facing a lefty. We'll discuss how their lineup against lefties just took a hit in the last game. So catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants, the Everydayers. Thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen. Those Everydayers will hear us tomorrow breaking down an important game 1. All the games are important, but right now when you're 16-20, you're facing a team in your division that really you kind of have to finish ahead of if you want to make the playoffs, I think, in the D-backs. And so you got to go in there and at the very worst split. Can't be getting swept in a 4-game series or losing 3 out of 4. I guess you could possibly survive 3 out of 4, but there's so much season left, so you could survive anything. But if the Giants could take 3 out of 4 or sweep this series, that would be huge. So anyway, again, I don't see them DFAing anybody here. You could certainly see someone go on the injured list. Like I said, everybody's got something going on with them physically, and so technically you can use that. You're not allowed to make up injuries and just use the injured list as a roster manipulation technically, but teams kind of do it anyway in a way. So I think you could see that, but at the very least, I don't think Sean Manaea makes his next turn in the rotation, certainly. And for Ross Stripling, I have a little bit more faith in Ross Stripling. He did have a pretty good outing at Houston when he went 5 innings and allowed just 2 runs, 0 walks, 5 strikeouts. Numbers look good there at Houston. I mean, that's a tough environment to pitch in. It's a good lineup. But then he followed it up, giving up 5 runs, 2 homers in his next start at home against the Brewers. But I could see Stripling getting more opportunities. But for Manaea, I think there's a move to the bullpen where I think you pitch him in blowouts. Like if you're up 9-0, give him a shot. Or if you're down by like 8 runs, give him a shot. But I do not think that he should continue to pitch in the rotation. So what are the alternatives? Well, Alex Wood, thankfully, it seemed like the hamstring injury he sustained was going to be maybe somewhat serious and make him miss a lot of time. Gabe Kapler said several weeks at least. And right now it's been about several weeks and he's about back. And so it's kind of perhaps best case scenario based on those comments. He did make a rehab start several days ago. The Giants are not announcing who their starters are going to be in this series. Like I said, Alex Cobb is pitching tonight, and that's a good thing for the Giants. He's pitched well. So again, before you bury the front office for these signings of Stripling and Manaea, don't forget, they also signed Alex Cobb, who's been great, and DeSclafani, who's been great outside of his last outing. And so you're not going to win them all. Also signed Gausman and Rodon to those deals. But anyway, they're not announcing their starters after Cobb in this 4-game series. And so that means a lot of different things. It could be that a move gets made from the minor leagues. And that's where the rubber meets the road here most significantly. Like I said, though, Alex Wood, I think, is a candidate to come off the injured list instead of getting another rehab start, just simply because they have to avoid Manaea in the rotation and possibly Stripling in the rotation as well. But I think you could live with maybe giving Stripling some more opportunities to start. And if you put him in the bullpen, can you imagine a bullpen where you've got Stripling and Manaea and Junis, and right now also Tristan Beck? These are all starting caliber type players. And so all of a sudden your bullpen is just full of starters, which is weird. And those guys like Manaea and Stripling haven't performed well out of the bullpen either. And when they're taking up so much of your bullpen, you end up having to use them in leverage situations, and they just have stunk. And so that's why maybe an IL trip is necessary at this point. It's going to be fascinating to see what they do. But the real question is, do they make a move for a youngster? And specifically, I'm talking about Kyle Harrison. I'm talking about Keaton Winn as well, someone we haven't spent nearly enough time discussing on this show. But for Kyle Harrison, I believe he's in line to start again today for Sacramento, assuming they have a game, which I'm checking right now. River Cats tonight at 6:45. So if he doesn't make that start, if he's like scratched from that start, that is serious prospect watch, because, could they call him up at this point? I think that they want to see him continue to do what he did in his last outing when he went 4 innings. It's not a lot of innings, but he faced only 12 hitters, struck out 7, gave up 1 hit, and walked 0. And so the issue for Harrison, you've heard me say this before if you're an everydayer, but has been walks. But for him to suddenly have an outing with 0 walks, if he can just do that, and I'm not saying you have to walk 0, but like 1 or 2 at most, 1 or 2 more times, I think that he becomes an option to be in that starting rotation. And, suddenly you'd be looking at Logan Webb, Alex Cobb, Alex Wood, Tony DeSclafani, Kyle Harrison as your starting 5, and you're just feeling a lot better about that than what you've seen out of Manaea and Stripling at the back end of that starting rotation. So coming up in just a minute, I also want to discuss Keaton Winn as a possibility. Like, he's really pitched well over his last handful of outings as well, and then some other just notes to cover with an injury that hurts them against left-handed pitching, and they're going to face a lefty tonight. So lots more to get into in just a minute. But before we do, I want you to know that this episode is brought to you by So Rare. Our new sponsor, So Rare, is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 MLB teams. Unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, So Rare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards and there's no cost to play. Plus, the more you win, the more you advance, collecting increasingly powerful cards and accessing next-level competitions and rewards. So Rare recently partnered with MLB All-Stars Juan Soto and Julio Rodriguez to serve as brand ambassadors. Head to sorare.com/lockedon, that's spelled SORARE.com, to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today. All right, as promised, a little bit about Keaton Winn and also just updating you on some things. There was a injury that hurts the Giants tonight. Tonight, they're going to be hurt by the fact that there was this injury that hopefully could be kind of minor, but possibly isn't minor. So we'll get to that and so much more in just a minute. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show, breaking down Game 1 against the D-backs. First time the Giants have seen this team this year. They're a good team. They're an athletic team. They kind of ran circles around the Giants last year, and so it'll be a test, a real test, and it's a 4-game series. And D-backs are, I think they came off losing 2 out of 3 to the Marlins, I think, and so maybe the Giants catching them at a good time. The Giants play the D-backs tonight at 6:40 Pacific. Catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So, yeah, just wanted to also mention Keaton Winn in addition to Kyle Harrison as a possible candidate to get called up at some point in the not too distant future. So when I look at he had a rough first couple of games in which he allowed a total of 7 earned runs in 6 1/3 innings over his first 2 outings. He, over the last several, has in 4 starts, 1 relief appearance that went 4 1/3 innings. So I guess there was an opener or something. 16 2/3 innings, a 2.70 ERA. And if I look at some of the more advanced metrics over that span, we're talking about a 30.1% strikeout rate, which is just very healthy, and only a 6.8% walk rate, which is also very healthy, and a 2.70 ERA and a 2.30 fielding independent pitching. I think he's allowed 0 home runs over that span. So fielding independent pitching is influenced by home runs, but he's allowed 0 home runs in the Pacific Coast League, which is a very lively offensive environment. And so I remember Dan Szymborski, when he did his ZiPS projections for the Giants going into 2023, mentioned Keaton Winn as a guy that his projection system ZiPS really liked. And he said that Winn reminded him of Kevin Gausman with the mix of pitches. So he's got a good splitter, he's got a good fastball, and he's done well over his last 5 outings in AAA. And so Keaton Winn, and I just want to also say Farhan Zaidi, I can't remember the exact quote, but I think it was on the Giants Talk podcast with Pavlovich and Cole Kuiper, and they interviewed Zaidi, and I think he basically said essentially the way that they're building up their pitchers and they're kind of having smaller workloads at the beginning because they found that helps limit injuries down the road to build them up slowly. But the point was, he said, he basically called out Kyle Harrison and Keaton Winn as, quote, potentially imminent big leaguers. And so, yeah, I mean, when you've got guys just stinking up the joint in the starting rotation like they have with Sean Manaea and Ross Stripling, that is when you start thinking about making a move. And clearly with Casey Schmidt as an example, they're willing to make some moves and go to some youth when there's a need. And as I said on that mailbag episode, they're not going to just do it if guys are performing well. But right now, these guys are not performing well at all. And so I think that we very well could see a move made. Maybe Winn is ready. Tristan Beck is also already on the roster, and he could get a start. I think he's looked better than Sean Manaea, so he could even just get the start over a Sean Manaea without having to make a roster move. But I'm more intrigued, obviously, by Kyle Harrison, but also Keaton Winn is a name to watch as well. So the last few things I want to mention, Austin Slater hurt himself trying to run out a ground ball. It would have scored a run if he hadn't hurt himself running out the ground ball. He just totally stopped running, and it would have been a run. They were already down. It was 10-2 at the time, so I guess it didn't really matter. They did end up scoring 6 runs on the day, but Slater dealt with a hamstring injury earlier, and that's why he missed a lot of time, along with an elbow injury. But he hurt it again, and he's an important part of that lineup against left-handed pitching. I want to say, I don't have the roster and the minor league rosters pulled up right now, but I believe that the kind of obvious move to replace Slater if he has to go on the IL would be Bryce Johnson, and that it would kind of remain a platoon there, and you'd probably see Johnson against lefties and Brett Wisely against righties. And so I wouldn't be shocked if Slater goes on the IL today and that they call up Bryce Johnson, who came off the concussion IL, and then they optioned him back to AAA, but they could obviously call him back up if Slater has to go on the IL. Wanted to mention that Conforto finally broke out of his slump and hit a home run. I believe long-term in Conforto, even more by a lot than I'm believing in the likes of Sean Manaea, because, Conforto is just a consistently really good hitter in his career, and he's just been bad, frankly, with the Giants. Hit some clutch homers early in the year, but has just been in a deep slump for about a month. But he didn't play all of last year. Timing is probably an issue, and I just believe in him long term. So just keep running him out there against righties, maybe sit him against tough lefties. But I believe in Michael Conforto, and I believe in Mitch Haniger. So that's one of those cases where I just think it's a small sample thing, and that over the course of 162, the talent will come out. And we saw it yesterday with a booming home run to right center field. And just want to mention too, do you realize Carlos Correa has been horrible so far this season for the Twins? And so I don't think, that means Correa's doomed and he actually is terrible. I think it's the same thing, where it's just a small sample, and, he's been just about as bad as Michael Conforto. And so, imagine if the Giants had signed him for $350 million and he was performing like Michael Conforto is performing. It would be even more of it'd be a huge story around here, but I would be saying stay calm. He's got a track record, blah, blah, blah. But, you look around the league, and in 5 weeks of a season, you see stuff like that. But you like to see some encouraging signs, and I haven't really seen that with the likes of Manaea, but we have seen it with Conforto. Early on in the season, he was swinging the bat pretty well. He's also, his walk rate is really good. He's doing a good job of not swinging at balls, but when he's getting pitches to hit, he just hasn't been hitting them lately. But I think, that home run being his final swing of the game last night, hopefully it carries over. They're facing a lefty tonight, so I wouldn't be shocked if he's not in the lineup. But because of the struggles, I'm not sure you just want to push it and have him not have the platoon advantage. Let him kind of be comfortable in the box and not facing lefties while he's in a deep slump. So I had even more that I could get to. I wanted to mention 16-20 is not a death sentence for the Giants. There's so many examples. The Pirates started out 20-8. If that team can go on a 20-8 run, by the way, they're 1-9 since, then there's no reason the Giants couldn't go on a 20-8 run. And you might say that's crazy. But in July of 2019, when the Giants finished 77-85, they went 19-6 in July, which is basically almost identical to that Pirates run I'm talking about. And so it happens in a season where you have stretches where you play well, stretches where you play poorly, and at the end of the day, you can't really know which one is the true performance until all is said and done and 162 have been played. And really the true performance ends up being the combination of it all. So anyway, 16-20, they're kind of staying afloat, but you'd like to see them having won a series against the Nationals at home. They've played the Nationals, the Royals, the Tigers, and the Marlins, and I believe they're 2-8 against those teams. And that just that's just why they're in the position they're in. They've played poorly against teams that they should be beating. And now you've got another tough, scrappy team that gave them a lot of trouble yesterday. I mean, last year in the Diamondbacks coming up, the Giants play the D-backs tonight at 6:40 Pacific. Catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspic. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show, you'll be hearing us breaking down this important series opening game with Alex Cobb on the mound. Come on, go out there and win a game, please, Giants. So I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.